Greetings, listeners. Hope you're doing well today. Today, we're joined by Sima Alizadeh from Pars Equality Center. She is a managing attorney at the Fremont Center, and we're happy to have her on today. Sima, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So let's just start off by you can tell us about yourself and how you kind of got into this space through your work and experiences.
Okay, so I've been doing this work for a really long time.
Mhm.
I tried not to become an immigration attorney. Growing up with immigrant parents, it seemed a little bit overwhelming. I kind of wanted to forget about it and go into a different sphere. However, the way that it sucked me in was that as a child of my own children are first generation. I was born in Iran, and my parents fled the Islamic Revolution in 19. I think it was around in the 80s. The revolution started in 79. So I landed in Los Angeles as a 5 year old, almost 5 years old. And being a child of newly arriving immigrants, there's a lot of responsibilities, such as reading their mail, helping them run their business, all the things that you grow up kind of fast and learn to juggle a lot of things. So I think my heart for families, reunification of families, and bringing people together, and my heart for people who are new to a country and have to assimilate, especially people who had maybe had really larger careers or way different careers than what they currently have. It takes a lot of assimilation to be able to survive in an environment when, you come from a place where you were maybe a doctor, but now you're working in a store. And my own parents were dancers. They had a large dance academy in Iran, but when they entered the US, they never danced again. And they had various businesses trying to survive, like a limousine business, a sandwich shop. My mom became a hairstylist for over 20 years at Supercuts and stuff. So, just a lot of having a heart for immigrants helps us and draws us to want to help them, no matter what your job ends up being.
Right. I liked how you talked about the struggles that immigrants face when
Mhm.
assimilating into a completely new culture. In your personal experience, what was that like growing up, being born in Iran with Iranian parents? And then I know you were very young when you came here, so
Yeah.
you might not have remembered a lot about Iran,
Hmm.
but still having that like cultural difference growing up in an Iranian household and then going to like school in a very American culture. What
Hmm.
was that like for you?
It was, like I said, it was exciting to be in the United States, but we had just left. My mom literally left like 14 siblings, 13 siblings behind, and she was the only one in the States. So for me, it was like we grew up really fast. We had to be fast on our feet, learn to read fast, learn to communicate fast. And I've had children just like me come into my office where they're explaining their parents' entire lives to me. And like, I just had a kid this week. I mean, he's 7 years old or 8 years old telling me where his parents' lease agreement is and what's going on. And so just that responsibility. I mean, growing up in the 80s and 90s in California was definitely a great place to be. I had the privilege of having freedoms that people in Iran don't have. And at the time during the Islamic Revolution, certainly didn't have. And so I don't take it for granted. Definitely, it's part of the process to immigrate is to go through these struggles.
And while this process was going on, and uh, do you mind sharing your roles and, like you said, you were managing like adult duties and how you're able to balance that with continuing to learn things
Mhm.
earlier on than people around you, and just how you were able to make friends and kind of really assimilate into society.
That's a great question. I I feel like one example I could give you, Philip, is that when I graduated top of my class in at Loyola Marymount, my father, and this is not typical. I don't want to throw my dad under the bus, because usually Iranian parents, similar to like Indian parents and stuff, they like push the grades, you know? For some reason, I don't know if it's because my parents were dancers and artists, they didn't do that. And when I graduated top of my class, they were like, "What is honors?" Like they didn't even know. My dad didn't even know. So um, balancing was like that's how disconnected I felt. My parents were kind of disconnected to my homework, to my schoolwork. Like it was really on me. But I don't really see that happening with all refugees and new immigrants now. But in my time with my family, it was more like it's the island of the kids in the United States, and then the parents are like trying to survive, build a career, build, be able to take care of us. And we were what they call latchkey kids, where we had our keys around our neck and open our door and open, we'd have to order Domino's pizza or grab Domino's pizza and go do our homework while our parents, ran their business and came home at night. So it's, I used to stay up very late to be able to talk to my dad till midnight. you know, I would be definitely a night owl because I needed to spend time with my dad, but he was so busy until midnight.
Yeah, that sounds great. Something that we often discuss on our podcast, that many refugees and many people working in the sector talk about is racism and prejudice that refugees face,
Yeah.
particularly Muslim refugees. And
Mhm.
with the rising Islamophobia,
Mm.
growing up, was that something that you experienced?
Well, my parents, Iran in general is a very divided, religiously divided country. It's not like Afghanistan where the dominant religion is Islam. So my parents were not very religious, which is not common in other, Middle Eastern countries, And but what we did face was, even amongst Iranians themselves in Southern California, like just the fear after the hostage crisis, after the revolution. A lot of folks were pretending to be Italian, not Iranian, stuff like that, where you'd run into even an Iranian person in LA at Vaughn's, and they would just start speaking in English to their kids so they don't associate with you, but things like that. But that kind of went away, and people, over time, that's the hope even right now with Islamophobia and everything, like over time with education, with information, with assimilation, with introduction, people will change. And I did see a change. And that's like where the spark of hope comes, like of how people view an Iranian American or an Iranian in general over the years. You know, over the years, that image has morphed from being like, oh, they're hostage takers to like, oh, they're very intelligent and mostly like to be doctors and surgeons and lawyers or something. There's just been a difference in what people associate. And I tell people I'm Persian, they'll be like, oh my God, you guys have the best kebabs, or you guys give us like this much rice when we go out, like so much has changed in the image of what people see. And that's the hope, is that what we see in my line of work, I serve mainly Muslims. In my line of work, I go to mosques. I'm very associated with the Muslim community, and I do feel that resistance in like the general community, and it hurts a lot to see my clients treated that way, and it hurts a lot. But the more, what I have to say to anyone is like, the more you are exposed to people that are Muslim, the more you're with them, the more you appreciate them, the more you understand their culture, the more, that image goes away. And that's like the hope of what we have, is that over time Islamophobia will be something that we've conquered, and I really hope so.
And I want to transition a little bit to the organization,
Hmm.
not only with Pars Equality, but also of your previous experiences and how, once your education was done, how you um, transitioned into the space of helping immigrants and refugees. Just how
Mm.
did you find that line of work, and what was it like to see other people going through the same thing, and just your position in that situation?
Yeah. I kind of fell into this work. I went to law school. I didn't know I was going to do immigration. But the way I fell into it is kind of a complicated story.
Hmm.
But it started off with helping the hikers that were detained in Iran. I don't know, this probably in I don't remember what year it was, like 2011 ish or 2010. So I got involved in translating for that matter. And after that, I met a wonderful attorney who was an American attorney who knew Farsi and was involved in the Iranian community. Her name is Nancy Hormashea. And she was kind enough to just like lead me into the immigration world. And I ended up running an office in Oakland, mainly for Muslims, that was like, yeah, mainly Yemeni folks and different Arabic speaking communities in Oakland, California. And I led this it was a once a week office to do free immigration. And I was the main person there, doing adjustment of status, helping with immigration matters, family petitions, and such. And I just fell in love with the work. Like, I still remember the clients that I had back then. It's like you develop like a love for the work, a love for seeing people get from one side of something to another. And one of the things my father used to always say is that, oh, Sima likes to solve people's problems. And it is the greatest solution to be like one of the greatest things to be able to say, oh, here, I fixed this. And now your status is established in the US, or your father will be joining you, or to see someone's child coming from the airport and them embracing them. Those are really solutions, for really huge problems. And I began to love the work so much. And that's when I joined Pars Equality Center in 2015. Excuse me. And I uh, began to work on starting the immigration project there. And at the time, it was a small operation. Of course, I can't credit myself for starting the entire thing, but however, I had the vision that there was a lot of services to be given to individuals. And at that point, the immigration services started there, and now it's grown. And it's at all three of our office locations in Los Angeles, in Fremont, and San Jose. Fremont being our most recent project, which I began 3 years ago, which was really interesting after the Taliban took over Afghanistan, and I just started this brick and mortar office right after that to help serve the newly arriving refugees and newly arriving parolees that were coming into the country.
Well, I think that's great, like how you started from almost like just scratch and then took it into, I think, 3 locations or 4 locations now. And one thing that we've sort of noticed, talking to people amongst our schools and interacting with everyday Americans about the refugee crisis, is that there's a very big lack of understanding and a lack of education on what happens in these countries and why there are so many refugees, which sort of leads to a lot of stigmas and stereotypes about them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering if you could take some time to tell the viewers like what exactly happened in the Iranian 1979 revolution, I think, and how that caused so many problems for the country and why there was such an influx of refugees.
Right. So, I mean, I'm not a history buff like my son, Urban. So I just know, I mean, you have to understand, I was a child, and what I know now of it is the Shah it was a monarchy in Iran that the capsule of it is there was a monarchy that was led by the Shah, and they had a very democratic like system and a lot of freedoms in arts and every area of life. Even what women were wearing, they were not wearing head coverings, and they wore mini skirts. And this is what my parents described as a free time in Iran. And then the Shah was taken over by Ayatollah Khomeini, and the Islamic Revolution occurred, and there was a lot of persecution in execution of individuals that were against the principles of the extremists that were coming in. And many people fled the country. Many people um, went everywhere around the world, including the United States. And my parents were one of those people who were freedom seekers, and they were into the arts. Actually, I recall that when I was a little child, I think I was about 4 years old, and we came home. My father had to flee to Germany, and we had our little flat in Tehran, where our school was, the dance school. And when my mother opened the door of the apartment, I just still remember it because it was such a core memory that the entire home was ransacked. Like my entire house had been demolished. Like my couch was, I think, even turned upside down. And so I just heard my mother scream, and we realized that the authorities had come in to search my parents' property. And the only reason being they had been given threat letters due to running the school, and that it wasn't, according to their Islamic principles, to have gymnastics or the dance anymore. So, I saw my parents suffer. I saw, my family suffer. And I saw my family kind of get disjoined, kind of what we see now with a lot of Afghans too that have come. Like some people went to Germany and some people went to Sweden. Some of my family came to United States. Like we suddenly had a dispersion of our units. Um, and we're very blessed that we came here, and I know a lot of folks that my family who went to Europe are also quite happy where they are in freedom. So I don't know if that answered the question, but definitely you know it's definitely, now we see that the Islamic Revolution continued, like there was never an end to it. It's like right now what we see in Iran and the people, recently there was a movement for freedom for women, and I'm sure you've heard of that. And it really has led to a little bit, the protests that had occurred have led to maybe some loosening of people wearing like hijab or head coverings, and different loosenings of women's rights. But definitely people in Iran still suffer, for they are still suffering for the government, what's going on in the government.
So, since your parents were, dance instructors and more into the art side of things, were you able to bring that here into the United States, or while like running the limousine company and other things they've done, have those have gotten left behind?
You know, it's a good question. What stayed was like my parents rocked it on every wedding dance floor. They were like the ones that were called to do the waltz and everything,
Uh-huh.
like a formal waltz and everything like that. And I used to love to dance myself for many years, but I think we did lose it. However, I'd like to say that a lot of the refugees that I serve, many people I've seen either lose it or use parts of what they used to do. And, I have folks that have done, individuals that come as refugees or newly arriving immigrants, and they have been business people and entrepreneurs in like Afghanistan, for example. And they arrive and they start to do entrepreneurial things here right away. So I've seen all levels of the spectrum, but in my personal family, unfortunately, it was mostly lost. As a career, but not lost as a family culture. But in other people's families, I've seen that that can continue. And but the big statements like, oh, when we tell people all the time, like my clients come here all the time and they sit in front of me and they tell me like how they're sad that their life has changed in some way. So they're sad either because their career has changed. I mean, their home has changed. They miss family members that they wish they could have near them again. The environment surprises them because it's not what they expected it to be. You know, these things really impact people. And I've noticed the biggest thing is that it impacts newly arriving individuals' mental health. It really does. It really affects them. And it's really important for newly arriving individuals to have a lot of support, avenues of support, whether it's from people here or like whether their own family here or new individuals that they meet or organizations or places of worship that they go to, because the support is so important to help them build a new life and a new normal of what they can establish here. And I do grieve when my clients really have such a change in their normal that, like, I have individuals that I serve here that they were at such high level positions in Afghanistan, for example. Some of them have even worked, uh, you know, in the presidential palace, or with a right hand, but now they're just living a humble life here in Fremont, and they have something really different than what they had. But it's all about how much support they have and how much success they get. If they have a really supportive wife or spouse and family and children and people they meet, they seem to do so much better.
Right. I sort of want to transition to present day.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk in the U.S. right now of like sort of closing down on immigration, and with the new election, there's probably going to be a decrease in the amount of refugees that are going to be allowed to come into the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, how does that affect your business, and how does that affect sort of the stability of refugee organizations?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great question. Right now, a lot of immigration practitioners and a lot of other people have a lot of angst about what's going to happen now after, January 20th, and, Trump's inauguration. We know that before, when he was inaugurated, he immediately stepped into making huge changes, such as the Muslim ban, the travel ban that really affected thousands upon thousands of individuals, which Pars Equality Center um, had a case, fighting against that. And currently, we're prepared as an organization to support the community the best that we can. We At the time when Trump was president before, we saw over in like a 97, don't quote me, but around 97% decrease in the arrival of refugees. It was so atrocious that even the refugee resettlement organizations and offices had closed. So when the Afghans came in 2021, they didn't even have enough refugee resettlement offices to handle the influx of such a large quantity of people. I think it was like over 70,000 individuals. And how are they going to process these individuals? So basically, I have a lot of angst myself. I know that there's going to be a lot of hard changes coming up. Um, I expect like litigation, opposition litigation for any changes that happen. Just recently, we had Biden release the Keeping Families Together, and I don't know if you guys had heard of that new policy to allow individuals that were undocumented that were married to U.S. citizen to proceed in a more fast, rapid way to getting status. They had always had pathways for those individuals, but this was a more rapid and speedy process. But I believe it was this month that it was completely rescinded and the policy no longer stands. And only a few people, like not only a few people, our agency were able to help to like use that policy before it was completely blocked by the courts. It blocked and then completely blocked this month. So I expect to see those similar types of case things happen where Trump will come up with a new policy and there will be more adjudication and fighting between trying to hold people's rights, and a lot of tug of war going on, and I don't like it at all. And I know it's going to be extremely stressful time. But as a provider of services and how it affects my work, it basically makes us work harder and more. And it gives us a lot of stress. Like I remember one of my most stressful times in my career was during the time Trump was president in terms of my career. and the most impactful time too, because we were, for example, for me, I was creating, videos and information and teaching attorneys how to do the travel ban waivers to get around the travel ban, for example. And our organization was litigating, was part of litigation, excuse me. So I believe that it will be a time of hardship, but a time of solidarity for individuals that are committed to immigrants. And I am preparing myself the best I can. But we've just come off of so many different stressors in the world, like COVID and all the changes. We still just feel like we're just starting to brace ourselves. And so I'm really hoping for the best, that we can win on certain things that in court, that may happen.
And to follow up on that, what are like the biggest legal changes to be expected, or things that are still being discussed within the courts or the in the political scheme of things, and that
Mhm.
might specifically affect your work? I know you touched on some things, but
Mhm.
if you want to expand on that a bit.
I am not I would not say I'm the expert to answer that, because I am so engrossed in what I do here for the communities that I serve that I have not been as up to par as other people on top of like the news of what's going to happen. I've tried to avoid it out of
Mhm.
just fear of what's going to happen. But there's talk of, like, for example, DACA, deferred action for childhood arrivals. People are trying to scramble to renew their applications, that perhaps that program will end. Applications for DACA renewals will end and stuff like that. So changes, in like a new travel ban, again, another Muslim ban. Many of my clients are asking for expedites or concerned about their parents, like they've petitioned for their parents, for example, in Iran, and they're so worried that, like, oh no, Trump's coming, he's going to close the borders again, and he's going to close the consular posts, he's not going to let Iranians come in again. And so we do anticipate we're going to have a lot of those things perhaps happen. And we are bracing ourselves. We've been through it once before. We're hoping that our skills in handling those catastrophes will come into play. In terms of what's going to happen at the southern border, I think that we did see also Biden change policies, on the border too, and start to be stricter on border control towards the end, and just perhaps it was a political move on his part. But we anticipate that folks, the shutdown of the southern border more, inability for people to make asylum claims, influencing the asylum process will be one of the biggest changes that we'll see, which will be really heartbreaking, I think, for me personally, and I'm sure for you guys too. Seeing the refugees trickle down to very small numbers, not seeing an influx of them, and also seeing the borders shut down is a really catastrophic thing when we're dealing with people fleeing persecution. Or, and we do have international laws that afford people protections. And so that's always heartbreaking to see when those are infringed upon and people cannot access relief or remedies.
On that note, like what kind of services or initiatives that your organization is running at this current moment?
Right now, all of our offices offer, Pars is a really holistic organization. We offer social services, and we also offer immigration legal services. Obviously, I'm on the immigration side in the legal department.
Mhm.
Fremont Pars, my location where I am in Fremont, California, at the Fremont Family Resource Center, is a very clinic based. It's a really wonderful project, and I encourage anyone who's in the Bay who wants to volunteer to contact me, because this project is a really live project. that we do clinics doing green card applications for individuals recently awarded asylum, recently arriving refugees, or folks that got their SIV approvals, or anyone who is eligible for adjustment that's income eligible for our services, which most individuals that seek our services all have a means tested benefit, such as Medi-Cal, food stamps, and such. And then this project also does affirmative asylum work. I personally do a lot of direct representation for different cases. We also do family petitions for folks who just got their asylum. They're petitioning for their family, or recently arriving refugees petitioning for their children or their spouse. The San Jose location is more consultation based, just like similar to like a law, like a boutique law firm. It's like you call, you make a consultation, you meet with a legal rep. The Fremont office is a very pro bono based project. We're involved with lots of different law firms, and we've had over 300 volunteers come this year on site to volunteer to help with cases. And so the project is really clinic based. And we also have every month we hold a citizenship fair, like a citizenship clinic for walk in, where folks can also renew their green card or apply for citizenship. And the Los Angeles office is very similar to San Jose, where, you know, they're doing all the same work we are and more, on a direct representation and pro se, meaning that self filing basis.
Just to transition back to what we were talking about with the border, and how Biden closed it and how it was a political move. As me and Volov have been getting more and more into the refugee crisis, sadly, we've noted that a majority of Americans are sort of like against it. And one thing that I've realized is I don't think they're necessarily like bad people. I think it's sort of like what I said before. They don't really know what's
Mhm.
happening. They're not really, I mean, we don't learn about this in school. We don't learn about this in our day to day jobs. And so there's a bit of, there's like a lack of education in this sphere for most Americans.
Mhm. Right.
So, what do you think that refugee organizations can do to get the word out and spread more awareness to that everyday American? Because I feel like once more and more Americans start feeling sympathetic to the plight of
Mhm.
refugees and want to help out, that's when like real policy change can happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question, Arnav. And like, I don't personally, me as a, you know, I see myself as an advocate, an activist, and a lawyer. You know, I just see that when I have people come and get involved in my project, it changes them. It changes how they view even certain countries and certain nationals from certain countries. And so I encourage people to volunteer with immigration in immigration projects such as the one that I'm running. You don't have to come to my project, but if you're local, I would love to have you. But this project will change you in how you view people that are arriving and inform you about changes. And it does create that when, like, for example, I recently met some individuals that were really conservative on immigration matters. But once they saw that keeping families together policy that I described change, and the courts block it, and you know, and everything that happened, they started to really question where they stood personally on the matter. And so I think the closer you come, like, and you put on your, you know, observation glasses on your eyes and you come closer to the scene, the more it changes your heart. But if you listen to propaganda and you're just sitting on your comfy sofa or you're on your phone swiping and you're in that conservative mindset, it just won't get you out.
All right, well, I think that's a great way to end it. Volov, do you have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, Sima. I think what you're doing is truly inspiring, and your firsthand insights on, what happened to you as a child in Iran, assimilating, and then getting into this line of work. It's truly inspiring, and I think it can serve as a lesson to us all. Thank you so much for coming. Do you have any other questions or comments?
No, I just wanted to thank both of you, Volib and Arnav, for having me today. And thank you for the work that you do.
Okay, of course. Thank you.